I wanted to make this video earlier, but suddenly America stopped the help of Ukraine. It was completely incomprehensible and contradicted the whole dynamics that Trump demonstrated in the last month. It just did not fit into the logic of what was happening, so I had two versions. The first is that this is another fool from the Pentagon. The same happened twice. The second is that Putin offered something to Trump, and now everything is more or less clear. It really was a fool from the Pentagon. Therefore, with pure conscience, it can be said that the attitude of the President of the United States to the war in Ukraine has changed a lot over the past 6 months. As is the attitude of Trump personally to Vladimir Putin, it must be said that Putin did the impossible. The President of the United States was very loyal to him, as well as to other dictators, because he himself would not be able to become. Moreover, Trump has a bunch of personal claims against Volodymyr Zelensky, and Ukraine, in his view, is part of Russia, or at least a sphere of influence enters the Russian sphere of influence. Moreover, the leader of America believes that everything that happened is Biden's personal fault. Therefore, the last thing he would like is to behave like Biden. But Putin was unable to bring the American president, who did everything to save the RF from crushing the country into Ukraine, to some incredible talent. Let's talk today about what happened and why Trump is getting closer and closer to the image of an elephant, upsetting the Kremlin. Let's start not with my arguments, but with a note from the New York Times. It has a quite interesting headline. It's called "Putin was wrong" and tries to restore the chronology of how the Russian dictator brought Trump down. The relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin has deteriorated, they write. This is a rather strange turn, especially considering how favorable the situation seemed to Russia immediately after Trump's election. The new US president showed respect for Putin, and it seemed that he would get everything he wanted in his war against Ukraine. But Putin has catastrophically overestimated his capabilities. During the election campaign, Trump promised to quickly end the war in Ukraine. When he took office, his administration was distrusted by Ukraine's desire to join NATO. It was ready to close its eyes on the occupied territory of Russia. It did not want to spend large funds on the defense of Kiev, and even considered the possibility of recognizing the annexation of Crimea in 2014. It was a kind of peaceful proposal that realized the key goals of Russia in the war. Then followed the catastrophic visit of Volodymyr Zelensky to the Oval Office in February. Trump humiliated Zelensky on the air, calling him ungrateful and saying, "You have no guts now." He also said that Putin became a victim of a witch hunt in the United States. At the same time, Washington began to press on Ukraine, asking to sign an agreement that actually transferred a significant part of its mineral resources. And all this happened at the perfect moment for Russia. It lost about 250,000 soldiers killed, and the economy was weak. But thanks to the condescending American president, Putin was close to declaring victory. But Putin was not ready to stop. As in 2022, when he began the invasion, Putin again believed that he could get everything. In his self-confidence, he repeatedly rejected Trump's proposal to cease fire. He continued to strike barbaric strikes with drones on Ukraine. At the same time, he continued to attack the front, trying to seize more territory and destabilize the Ukrainian government. His specific goals remain unclear, but some American officials, writes the New York Times, believe that he is still dreaming of seizing Kherson, Odessa, or even Kiev, the largest Ukrainian cities. Washington does not consider these ambitions delusional. Trump, with growing concern, watched what was happening. In April, after a massive blow to Russia over Ukraine with rockets and drones, he wrote in social networks, "I don't like Russian strikes on Kiev. This is unnecessary and extremely not in time. Vladimir, enough." Now Trump is criticizing Putin, not Zelensky, after several phone conversations with the Russian leader this year. His opinion has clearly changed. This week he sharply stated that he was dissatisfied with Putin because he was killing Ukrainians. "Putin is constantly bringing us all sorts of nonsense. If you want to know the truth," said Trump, "he is always polite to us, but it turns out to be an empty word. If these words were to be pronounced from the mouth of any other politician, the publication would not be surprised." But hearing this from Trump speaks of many things. Putin has finally pushed the White House away and has probably missed his chance to negotiate. Trump has resumed the supply of weapons to Ukraine after a brief pause from the Pentagon. Republicans in the Senate insist on a new package of sanctions against Russia. Trump is considering the proposal. Ukraine is tired of war but does not lose will to fight, especially if Russia continues its offensive. It introduces innovation into the battlefield, and its drones cause serious damage to the Russian army. The promise of support from Europe and the additional U.S. air defense system makes it almost impossible for Putin to end this war by force. This is all a pretty good description of what happened, but I will add a couple of strokes. Do you understand what's going on? We all the time look at this war with our own eyes, but from the ocean it can look very differently, namely as a catastrophic failure of Russia. Over the past 3.5 years, the Russian Federation has become weaker and not stronger in the eyes of the whole world. Because while there was no war, it was possible to really believe that this was a terrible military machine. But reality showed, and again, I will now say cynically, that it cannot cope even with Ukraine. Here it is necessary to explain why even. This is not a destructive term in this context. The fact is that the potential of Russia and Ukraine is simply incomparable. Territory, population, economy, already here you can see the incredible disproportion of forces. And if we start looking at the army before 2022, then Kiev really had to fall in 3 days. The Soviet heritage, which was lost to Russia, is colossal. The infinite number of tanks, ammunition, planes, ships, missiles. Well, that is, in general, there was not a single category in which the Soviet Union would be at least comparable to the Russian army in 2022. Absolutely, by each parameter, the Russian forces surpassed the Ukrainian. Well, it's already been half of the 4th year of the war, and Russia still does not have significant successes as far as the potential differences are concerned. Here, of course, Vladimir Solovyov, in a couple with Putin, will jump in and start bragging about the support of Ukraine to NATO countries. But the fact is that the given support is also somehow incompatible with the forces of the RF. Total about 250 billion military aid was allocated to the United States and Europe. Well, plus or minus. Russia spends 450 billion a year. Well, that is, you can't fall for NATO here. Just like on some kind of miracle weapon, Ukraine has not been handed over a single most modern aircraft. The F-16 that recently appeared is an old man. And what am I telling you? You've been watching the war, and you know perfectly well that the help of Ukraine is important, but only an hour per teaspoon. That's why, yes, Russia has been suffering for 3.5 years, just some kind of, well, it's a complete fiasco, despite the fact that it formally captures some territory and kills people. Although it loses its people many times more, this is a separate madness. Here we turn off the cynical fashion, and I will explain why I am telling this. The fact is that Trump saw all this. That is why he thought that the war would end quickly. Putin can't help but understand that he thought Trump was in deep beep. And not only did he think, he wrote about it too. Remember, he saw several times that he wanted to help Russia. This was the absolute truth. Trump really several times stretched the hand of help to Russia, focusing on the very real situation on Earth. But every time Putin did not care about this hand. As a result, Trump was struck by this. He realized that either the Russian president does not understand what is happening in reality or pretends that he does not understand. The last drop, in my opinion, has become a recent call. It happened quite suddenly, and it seems to me that I know what happened. Now I will draw you a picture. You can think otherwise, but for now I see it this way. The deputy head of the Pentagon, nicknamed Colby, who is known as an anti-Ukrainian, gives a signature to hex to paper on the suspension of help to Kiev. He signs, help stops. Trump didn't take the course. He is surprised to learn about this, but sees the possibility in it. Putin and his bosses repeated all the time that the problem is in the help of the United States and that their conditions for the end of the fire are a stop to Western aid. Trump thought, okay, since we have already stopped it, it turned out that way. I'll try to call Putin. He should like it. He should become more persuasive. But the result did not give it. Putin continued to drive the same purge, as if in front of him is not the President of the United States, but another propagandist like Tucker Carlson, who was fired, what is called, for cruelty from the Gestapo. And here the President of the United States finally made sure that everything that the Kremlin dictator is carrying was nothing, and the time for peace was over. And here I want to talk a little more in detail about the transformation of the last month, because, as I said, I wanted to make this video before the last few slides because it seemed to me that I saw changes in Trump's rhetoric, and now I understand that yes, they really were. You can notice this, it is in many ways related to Iran, no matter how strange it sounds. The fact is that Trump, in principle, in his current version of the magician, he supports the idea of isolationism of the United States. Well, that is, the United States should not interfere in any conflicts, participate in anything, be as far away as possible from America first, and so on. And in fact, most of the mage circles that have become around him, they support this rhetoric, they like it. They are like, okay, we shouldn't help anyone, we shouldn't get involved in anything, we should sit here in America and deal with our American problems. America first, no way. But it turned out that it didn't work. Donald Trump was sure that other countries wouldn't hinder him, that everyone is so afraid of the United States, that the United States is so strong, and he is such a good negotiator, that without doing anything, he will be able to achieve absolutely everything. And the trade war and much more that he has done in the last 6 months, as you remember, accompanied him with a large number of threats. He threatened Hamas, he threatened Canada, he threatened Mexico, he threatened Europe, he threatened everyone in a row. But do you know what the problem is with the threats? Vladimir Putin faced this earlier with his nuclear threats. If you do not implement them, if no one behaves in your blackmail and you do not implement the threat, then they will start reading you as a lie. Your opinion is no longer important, especially if you change it 10 times a day. In fact, this is what happened to Donald Trump. He, of course, did not expect this. He expected that everyone would fall on their knees in front of the great Emperor of America, the King of America, the Sitka of America, who else is there? The Superman of America, right? Now he posts himself in the form of a Superman, but this did not happen. It hit him hard on his ego. The thing is, it seems to me that Trump understands very simply. He is obviously also a sociopath like Vladimir Putin, but a super narcissistic. That is, he is not interested in Ukraine, he is not interested in Russia, he is not interested in even China, and America is not interested in him. Donald Trump is only interested in Trump. And the problem is that behind all this pathos, behind all this attempt to fulfill this promise, everything began to collapse. His rating began to collapse, countries around him began to send him to the ass, and his actions gave a reverse effect. For example, the fact that he began to threaten Canada allowed the liberal forces to win the elections, which, against the background of these threats, said, "No, we are against becoming the 51st state of America." And therefore, the liberal forces won. Well, they broke all general election predictions. Trump literally helped them, and not only them, this happened many times. When Trump got into a fight with Zelensky, the effect for Ukraine was the opposite of what could be expected from Trump. The rating of Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian state, well, how is it? Power structures grew inside Ukraine itself. Even Zelensky's critics among the military, which I read, who constantly criticize him, wrote, "No, only we have the right to criticize him, not some red ass from the overseas." Trump's actions were reversed. It was funny. He didn't want to put pressure on Russia, but the trade war that he started led to the fact that oil prices fell, causing Russia to have the strongest blow of all that was from the point of view of economic blows. Everything turned out the other way around, but the Lavras got their hands on it. And here, on the horizon, Iran was blinded. There's also a separate chain of events that I don't want to delve into, but basically Trump approached a situation in which there was no reason at all not to strike on Iran. A situation in which Israel carried out a magnificent operation in one day, destroying the Iranian PVO and taking full and absolute control over the airspace of Iran. Iran, which was considered a threat to the whole world and not only to Israel and a great and powerful power within the region, fell in a day. Well, someone can say that he didn't fall, and in general, he then launched a rocket, and in general, everything is fine with him. There are people like that. I ignore their existence in the sense that if foreign bombers fly over your country and they don't crash, that means that's it. Well, you don't have the opportunity to defend yourself. You can become a large terrorist group by launching a rocket, but you are no longer a powerful state. Your defense has been trampled, and in fact, before Trump, there was a choice. There is a unique goal, a unique object for which there is a unique weapon, and there is Iran, who for 60 days ignored Trump's ultimatums. He wanted to negotiate with Iran. He wants to negotiate with any dictator. He really doesn't want to fight with them. He really doesn't want to pressure them. He respects them. He wants to be like them. He wants to hold parades like them. He tried to hold a military parade. Well, you remember how it looked, not at all the way he wanted it to be. And so he saw that everyone was spitting on his back, that dictators were spitting in his hands, which she was pulling at him. And here is the chance before him, the chance to fulfill his threat, the chance to demonstrate greatness in his understanding. And the bombers flew to bomb Iran. After that, Trump began to write about peace through force. After that, Trump saw that actions are more effective than threats, or at least threats are much more effective when they are followed by actions. Trump went down the path of typical American hawks. I have a good relationship with American hawks, as you know. The world through force is quite a legitimate slogan. In my opinion, a peacemaker is not the one who talks to everyone. A peacemaker is the one who lays the road to the world, and he lays it out by force, by bombers, or by threats, or by negotiations. Question number 10, depending on what exactly makes sense now. An ideal peacemaker is ready to do anything, to speak and to beat. Because the establishment of the world, if we are talking about aggressors, if we are talking about dictators, is impossible without the use of force. Or at least without a situation in which these aggressors believe that the force is in the wrong form, whether it is the force directly in military power or economic power, economic pressure. Dictators must believe that the force will be applied. This is exactly what a peacemaker does. They just stand and whine, "This is not a peacemaker, this is a snitch." These are two big differences. And Trump understood this, felt it, and saw the result. And this, little by little, became another Trump. This is the Trump who is ready to achieve his goal peacefully. Why did this result, and how did it all directly affect his views of Russia? I'll tell you now. Before that, let me remind you that you can support this video with your like. Put a like if you want Trump to become a full-time elephant. Put likes, write comments, subscribe to the channel. It helps to spread this video. Also, you can support this channel on Patreon. The link to it is in the description. And by buying NVPN, this is a tool for bypassing blockages, which allows you to bypass these blockages. Slowdown of YouTube, Twitter, Instagram blocking, Telegram in the near future, obviously. You can bypass all this with NVPN. The link to the purchase is in the description. By buying it, you support this channel, which you are very grateful for. It is legal in Russia to buy VPN. To use VPN is allowed so far. Well, we are returning to Trump, who, after Iran, realized that the world works through force, and realized that it works much better than everything he had tried before. I even saw how it seemed to me that Putin sucked a little, because I saw how it happens. Putin had a speech at the PMEF, and after that he had 2 more speeches, and there he suddenly left. If at the PMEF he said, "Yes, we can now capture the amount," then the next conference, it was a day or 2 later, he said, "Yes, we are going to, we believe that the war will end in the foreseeable future, that we are reducing military spending next year," and so on. Well, that is as if they replaced it, because he saw that Iran, that, excuse me, Trump, can still explode sometimes, and sometimes these are not empty threats. But Trump, having felt this testosterone approach, comes to the NATO summit where everything is fine. He starts to communicate normally with his allies in some century. Yes, there is this daddy not daddy, let's forget it all, like a nightmare. But the fact remains, Trump sincerely says that he supports the 5th article of the NATO protocol. That he will help to defend Europe. He held meetings with Zelensky where they kindly communicate, no scandals. And when after that the help stoppage happened, Putin again went crazy, and the help stoppage itself caused great confusion, including mine. But in the end, we know what exactly happened. In short, Trump saw 3 things. The first thing is that Vladimir Putin is not able to negotiate. Vladimir Putin does not imagine a real situation on the ground, and Vladimir Putin spits into the stretched hand of help. The second thing is that the world through force is a working strategy that gives results here and now. And the third thing is that if you communicate normally with your allies, they also communicate normally with you. And all this leads basically to the fact that you sit more firmly in your chair and you have fewer conflicts. They respect you more and love you more. And Trump is the most important thing. He wants to be loved by literally such an unloved child. Therefore, this is what Trump has become. Now the question is what this gives us. Then, as a result, we will, conditionally speaking, get in this war. And then, of course, I have to make a promise that we are still talking about Trump. This means that at any moment in his unstable head, anything can appear at all. He can turn 180 degrees again and do it relatively easily. However, the overall dynamic seems to be traced. And at this stage, if we believe the inside and the announcement, we are on the verge of the fact that the new US president will really start to press on Russia and support Ukraine. What exactly can he do with the most visible future? Well, first of all, he writes that President Donald Trump, for the first time after his return to the White House, will make a decision to send weapons to Ukraine. Before that, Kiev received a party in which the previous US President, Joseph Biden, made a decision. As Reuters writes with a link to the source, Trump uses a procedure that allows the US President to make a personal decision and reduce the army reserves of the US to help allies in a certain situation. Biden used this procedure before. One of the sources reported that the size of the package can reach about $300 million. According to the sources, the package can include a Patriot missile as well as a medium-range missile. However, they clarify that the final decision at that time has not yet been made. Yes, Trump's administration sent military equipment to Ukraine as part of a package adopted by the Biden administration. That is, Trump himself did not highlight anything. In addition, Trump made a scheme to supply weapons to Ukraine and announced an important statement on Russia. This is no longer a retelling of sources, this is Trump himself. The United States will supply new weapons, which are intended for Ukraine through NATO, Trump said in an interview with the NBC. According to him, thanks to such a supply scheme, the alliance will pay for the weapons. Also, the American president said that on Monday he was going to make an important statement about Russia, but did not clarify the details. We are sending NATO weapons, and NATO pays for this weapon 100%. Thus, the weapons sent to us are sent to NATO, and then NATO supplies this weapon to Ukraine, Trump explained the new supply scheme. It is assumed that Washington will sell weapons to other countries of the North Atlantic Alliance, understanding that those will give it to Kiev. The scheme also suits the Ukrainian side, as we remember. According to the American president, the agreement on supplies to Ukraine was reached at the NATO summit, which took place at the end of June in Gaja. The Axis source said that under such a scheme, not only PVO funds can be supplied, but also offensive weapons. In an interview with NBC, Trump again said that he was disappointed with the actions of Moscow. I'm disappointed in Russia, but let's see what will happen in the next couple of weeks. I think on Monday I will make an important statement on Russia, he added. Volodymyr Zelensky, in turn, on the Forum on the Restoration of Ukraine in Rome on Thursday, said that Germany is ready to pay for 2 Patriot batteries, one system is ready to pay for Norway. Readiness to buy 2 batteries from Berlin was confirmed by Friedrich Merz concert in Rome. Secretary of State Rubio, in turn, after the talks with the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Lavrov in Kuala Lumpur, said to journalists that Washington is negotiating with European countries on the transfer of the Patriot battery to Ukraine. It would be great if the countries that ordered the Patriot batteries agreed to send them to Ukraine, he explained. The decision on the supply of weapons is a serious change in Trump's policy, says Axios. Before that, the American president allowed the supplies approved by Joseph and Biden but did not sanction the new ones. Trump seems to have learned a lesson that it is impossible to reboot relations between the United States and Russia, writes CNN. Putin has been heavily calculated, repeatedly rejecting Trump's attempts to establish a truce, which ultimately turned the American president, a potential ally, into a skeptic, writes the New York Times, mentioned at the beginning of the article. Well, let's get away from all the money a little bit. Well, that is one more thought that I threw. I'll throw it carefully because it's like that, you know, the hat is thrown away, of course. Before throwing it, let me remind you that the draft law is still being prepared, this one of punitive sanctions against Russia. More precisely, they are not quite in relation to Russia. The important part is to impose secondary sanctions on those countries that buy Russian oil. Of course, under the guise of China and India, they impose 500% sanctions. That is, in fact, America is trying to introduce an embargo on Russian oil in this bill, and there are a lot of talks around this bill. Now there have been talks that it will be adopted. Rubio publicly said that the lower and upper chambers are ready. Graham said, a few more senators said that they would start. And even from the lower chambers, these voices were given out that everything was closed, now they would drive away. Insiders say that while it is being discussed between the White House and the components of the bill, that sanctions should not be mandatory, but according to Trump's wish. This is, of course, a bit of an exaggeration because Trump can introduce any sanctions that he wants, but nevertheless. The point is that many discuss this bill. I think it will really appear in the near future. It will really be adopted. Trump is ready to sign it. Again, this is a new measurement because the American administration held this bill for 2 months, but it seems to be ready. But the important thing here is that many skeptics say that, in principle, this will not change anything. Because this bill will not introduce any sanctions, Trump will not accept them because he has relations with China, because he has his relations with India, and so on. This is possible and this is rational. That is, I agree with Vladimir Melevin and with many others who assess this as a crazy act on which the USA will not go. This is true, but there are nuances, and about this nuance I will just dream together. The fact is that Trump is still an idiot. Well, that is, Trump is still emotional, rather sharp, completely unfriendly with rational behavior of a person. And here there is one motive that, it seems to me, can lead to the most unexpected consequences. This motive is that the last thing that Trump wants is to do the same as Biden. Biden's signature was that he supplied weapons to Ukraine, a lot of weapons. But he did it in fear and constantly, conditionally, did not finish it. That is, he constantly blocked the whole nomenclature of arms, constantly feared the Russian nuclear strike. The same with the sanctions. The sanctions were serious, but not as serious as they might be. People from Trump's administration estimate them to be 3 out of 10 or something like that. And the thing is, if Trump didn't follow the path where he opposes Biden in his term, that he is together with Russia, that he is in cahoots with Putin. That is, if Trump has already left this path, if Putin doesn't like him anymore, if Putin has already dominated him, and I understand that Putin can, and we have seen it, then to walk on the path where he will act purely like Biden, dedicating small packages of help. Introducing some relatively small sanctions, it seems to be offensive to him. Therefore, there is a chance, not a big one, but a chance that we will really see something serious. Or in the supply of weapons. I don't know, let's dream. 2,500 Abrams which are buried in the desert, which will never be used, because in the wars of the future there will be no such tanks. This is obvious already now. Rosch and Comparat are going to Ukraine. This is all, and it will be simple. Well, that is, it's like, just imagine. It is clear that I am exaggerating. It is clear that this will not happen. But I'm just saying that in order to be different from Biden in the new path chosen by Trump, he needs to do something serious or really introduce these sanctions. Many people say that this will be a problem for the US economy. Yes, but this is the ultimatum. This is the ultimatum of India and China. Are India and China ready to stop trading with the United States in order to buy cheap Russian oil, which they already have all the warehouses, because they were, in fact, some of the few who bought Russian oil for the last 3.5 years. India in general, all warehouses are filled with this oil, and so on. The question is open. But do we believe, can I admit that the madness of Trump, which is now on our side, or at least is moving in this direction, let's be careful, yes, because we should not forget that Trump has not done anything yet, but that is. Just by restoring the aid, Trump has returned to the level of conditionally 0.0. Yes, he has not done anything in plus yet, but we have a low demand for those from whom we are waiting for something bad, so everyone takes it this way, so can we imagine that the madness of Trump on our side can play a cruel joke with Putin? Yes, this is exactly the scenario, one of which was considered by pro-Trumpists in November last year, when they said no, Trump is as crazy as Putin, and this means that it will be a difficult problem for Putin. Half a year it was not so half a year Trump was. Perfect for Putin. Half a year Trump played at the gates, helping Vladimir Putin, helping in everything, helping very seriously. If in the place of Trump there would even be a person like Biden who would continue his policy on the supply and assistance, then Ukraine would now be in a much better situation, But these 6 months were Trump, but let's see suddenly the next 6 months when the madness of Trump will be on the side of Ukraine. Will lead to even more difficult times for Russia. I don't know, only time will show. Write your opinion in the comments. It is interesting what you think. Do you agree with me or not? I know that there are people who believe in a cunning game of Trump. Well, that is, it means that he's trying to save Russia in every possible way. Or what is the agent of Russia and so on? Write your opinion. I am happy to read acquaintances because the topic is discussed. The development options are also the most different, but it seems to me that one thing can be fixed for sure. Vladimir Putin is the son of Donald Trump. And thank you very much to Vladimir Putin for this incredible superpower to turn everything into beep. Well, that is. Only Vladimir Putin could beep Syria so much after 10 years in prison. Only Vladimir Putin could beep both Armenia and Azerbaijan at the same time. Only Vladimir Putin could beep all Soviet reserves. Only Vladimir Putin could crush the Russian economy. This is a straight unique person of such a destructive potential for their own desires. Well, I don't know, such an ineffective use of resources we have not seen for a long time, and thank God that this is so. Well, Michael Nacke was with you and see you soon. All the best. Bye.